Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to Dell Technologies workshop. This workshop is going to be talking about reaching diversity and inclusion moonshot goals by leveraging stars, what we basically call our Progress Made Real 2030 goals. And we'll talk about that in just a little bit. But let's go ahead and start with some introductions. My name is Gabriel Arden Miller. My pronouns are he, him. I work on our diversity talent acquisition team, and I lead our sourcing efforts on diversity. I'm also a leader on our Pride ERG. I work with Nikki, and I'm going to have Nikki go ahead and introduce herself.
Thank you, Gabe. So my name is Nikki Gibson. I am the North America lead for our Pride LGBT Employee Resource Group. I am also on the HR compliance team, and I've been at Dell for almost 21 years now. It's kind of crazy to think about that. And my pronouns are she, her.
Hello, everyone. My name is Asha George. I'm the Vice President of Diversity and Inclusion. I lead our employee resource groups at Dell, as well as our women's initiatives. My pronouns are she and her, and I've been at Dell for over 10 years.
Hi, everyone. My name's Angeline Tucker. My pronouns are she, her, and I've been at Dell 14 years now. I'm working on various strategic initiatives right now. One is our Diversity Action Council, and currently I'm also working on our Return to Site initiative.
Hi, hello, my name is Lou Candiello. I'm a Senior Manager of Diversity Talent Acquisition. My pronouns are he, him. In my role, I'm responsible for our diversity recruiting strategy in North America to include LGBTQ, individuals with disabilities, ethnicity, and gender. And I've been with the company 16 years.
Definitely, lots of years of experience here. So before we begin, you'll be able to actually look at these slides and download them after our presentation, but just want to make you aware about our policy regarding equal employment opportunities. Basically at Dell, our philosophy is we want to hire you for what you have to bring to Dell. In other words, we want you to be yourself. So several of us are wearing our Be Yourself t-shirts because that's our philosophy when it comes to having you here at Dell. All right, let me give you a quick agenda for today. We've done the welcome. We want to introduce you to our Moonshot goals. Then we want to go into a discussion of what we're doing for our current employees, then go into a discussion about talent acquisition initiatives, and then we'll wrap it up. So we have a very lively discussion prepared for you, and I hope you enjoy it. So I'll kick it off to Nikki.
All right, thank you, Gabe. So Asha, we would like for you to share with us about our Moonshot goals. We launched these last year for 2030 initiatives around these 4 key pillars. Do you mind sharing with the group about each of these specifically?
Sure. So Nikki, last November 2019, Michael Dell stood on stage and announced to the world our 2030 Progress Made Real initiatives. And it's really our vision and how we as a company want to socially impact the world. And so there's a couple of things. Obviously, as we go into the conversations, there were 4 pillars. One was advancing sustainability, really about respecting the environment in which we do business in. Cultivating inclusion, making sure that we are the most inclusive workplace where people can feel like they're at their best selves. Transforming lives with technology. In the world there are haves and have-nots, and we believe that technology can really play a bigger role in being able to build that balance in between. And finally, underpinning all of that by our commitment to uphold ethics and privacy with our customers and partners. So those are the 4 pillars. I'm going to spend a little bit of time talking about cultivating inclusion, which is our commitment really to increase the diversity of leadership in our workforce overall. So one of the big first Moonshot goals was around women. Our first Moonshot goal is really that 50% of our global workforce and 40% of our global people leaders will identify as women. If you think about that, attracting, developing, and retaining a diverse workforce couldn't be more important to us. And then as you think about even women, intersectionality even plays a bigger role. This is why we've also focused on having 25% of our US workforce and 15% of our US people leaders to be Black, African American, Hispanic, or Latino minorities. So as a company, we're actively focusing on all our team members, regardless of background, race, ethnicity, specifically those who just have the will and skill that want to succeed, we want to have a place for them. And so that's what those 2 Moonshot goals are around. The third piece is once you bring in the workforce, we want to make sure that we have the most inclusive environment available. And so we have a signature unconscious bias training called MARC, called Many Advocating Real Change. And MARC is really focused on having conversations that are really uncomfortable and learning to become comfortable. And so there's topics such as bias, harassment, microaggression, privilege, and it's really about helping us to have better conversations around inclusion. And we have an incredible commitment across the company. Today, 100% of our executives have been trained in MARC. 95% of our middle management has been trained in MARC. And our goal by 2030 is that 95% of all of our employees will be trained in MARC. And so that's our third Moonshot goal. And the fourth one is my favorite, which is our employee resource groups. Many of you guys here on the panel are with me, are part of an employee resource groups. If you think about it, you know, employee resource groups are really the heart of the heartbeat of the company. And if you think about when you're trying to bring people into the company, you want them to feel the most welcomed. And our employee resource groups are the most passionate, inclusive team members that collectively, when they come together, they build that inclusive environment. So our goal is that 50% of our workforce will be part of an employee resource group to drive active social impact. So with that, I'll hand it back.
Thank you so much, Asha. So let's ask Angeline, based on these goals, you know, how does your organization support these Moonshot goals?
Yep, so we've had a variety of activities going on, and I think I'll put them in 3 big buckets. One is from a culture perspective, we've really been looking at our own culture code and how can we incorporate inclusion and diversity more into our DNA and what we're about. And so we're about to actually launch a refreshed culture code to the whole company that really doubles down on inclusion and what we look for from our leaders and all of our team members. Within HR, we have 2 other areas of focus that we've been looking at. One is around increasing diverse representation. And then the second one is around really engaging our leaders on diversity and inclusion and how do we grow diverse talent. And so in the increased diverse representation bucket, Lou will speak to this. Within the talent acquisition team, there are a ton of initiatives going on there to increase representation. So I won't steal his thunder. But you know, besides increasing the pool and changing the process, also looking at internally as we promote leaders and team members within the company, how do we increase representation in those when those choices happen? On the engage leaders and grow diverse talent front, from a development perspective, we've got some great development programs throughout Dell. And as we look at those development programs, really looking at how are people selected into those and how are we incorporating inclusion content into those programs to make sure it's really pervasive throughout anyone who goes through those programs. And then for leaders, really looking at what types of inclusive leader behaviors do we really want to highlight and make as the cornerstone that we want all leaders to aspire to. There are, of course, leadership accountability measures in terms of levels of diverse representation or how they're promoting or increasing talent movement of our diverse talent. But additionally, we want to leverage the inclusive behaviors, not just to focus on specific diversity pieces like the Moonshot goals that Asha mentioned, but especially with COVID now and with everyone working in this remote mode, there's so many opportunities to really take advantage of a more level playing field in some regards, but also how do we increase that inclusion as we have to kind of operate through Zoom or through all these virtual modes. So, you know, besides focusing on our culture, which of course is the overarching umbrella, within HR, we're really focusing hard on increasing the diverse representation. And then how do we engage our leaders and focus on growing our diverse talent?
Good, thank you. Lou, same question. Can you tell us how talent acquisition is playing a role?
Yeah, absolutely. I think our sweet spot is around the cultivating inclusion goals, right? So how does our team develop a strategy to go after that 50% in those Moonshot goals that Asha described earlier? So we go about it thinking and acting a little bit differently than we have in the past, right? We have to be much more focused in our approach, but yet be innovative and more creative and kind of tapping into those talent pools. So as I mentioned earlier, our team is kind of comprised into pillars. So we have strategy focus around gender, we have strategy focus around ethnicity, individuals with disabilities, veterans and military spouses, and also the LGBT community. So in each of those pillars, what can we do that's different than maybe some of the other companies aren't thinking of? So in gender, we have a career restart program that's focused on primarily women re-entering the workforce that having taken some time off. But how do we expand that? How do we start to look at that more broadly from not only re-entry into the career you left before, but how do we think about upskilling or reskilling and kind of expanding a pipeline of qualified talent to come into Dell Technologies, into an aligned position. Same inside of individuals with disability. That's where our neurodiversity and autism hiring program kind of starts. But even with that, we have to think about that even more innovatively in a COVID environment. So how do we remodel what we've already established as a best-in-class program into COVID in a virtual environment? So we're in the midst of reformatting that as well. But the idea is that the general idea is the intent of building these strategies is to partner with the recruiters on the delivery side. They're actually going to bring more diverse candidates to our hiring managers so that they have a much more broad spectrum and a full slate of candidates to choose from. That's where we kind of, that's where the rubber meets the road, where we have to kind of expand the talent pipeline. We have to think differently about how we attract and recruit that talent into Dell Technologies.
All right, thank you.
Right. So, Angeline, you talked a little bit from an HR standpoint about some of the things that we're doing internally, high level. Is there anything, that you'd like to elaborate on, or anything that you'd like to talk about specifically from an HR standpoint on what we're doing now with respect to our current team members and ensuring that we're doing all that we can to meet our goals?
One example that I can dive a little deeper in from a cultural perspective is we're focusing on an initiative to remove non-inclusive language in our day-to-day work. So things like slave master in programming or blacklist, whitelist. And so that started off in our engineering groups, but it's actually spanning out across the company to say, where are other places that we might be using this language? And from a cultural change perspective, how can we actually have that just part of our DNA so that as we're looking and we're always thinking about how we might use more inclusive language. So that's an example I would say on the cultural front.
I love that. Thank you. And then one thing, that we recently launched just this year, I led a project to launch self-ID in the United States, which we're really excited about. And over time, this will broaden to include some of the other regions where our team members can safely identify. But this is just one way, I think, as a company, we are committed to doing everything that we can to reach these goals. Giving the team members an opportunity to self-ID, whether or not they're a member of the LGBTQ community, a person who identifies as having a disability, or even a veteran in the armed forces. These are just three key ways that as a company, we're really, taking to heart what these goals are, because we know if we're not measuring it, we really can't count it, right? It's not data. So that's just another example.
Yeah, and I'd also be remiss if I didn't mention our Standing Strong Together initiatives. I mean, Asha, did you want to chime in on that, or you want me to just kind of cover that quickly?
Yeah, go ahead.
Right. So, recently, especially in the US with the murder of George Floyd, I have been so proud of how Dell has responded to that. I really have to say, having been here for 14 years, the way our CEO, Michael Dell, and the rest of our executive leadership team has really stepped up to the plate in response to that has been significant. And so an initiative called Standing Strong Together has been formed, specifically focusing on racial inequity, our Black team members, and how we can make it a better environment, both inside Dell, but also what we can affect and impact. So an example of some of the things that have happened in Standing Strong Together immediately was our executive leadership team, including our Chief Operating Officer, Jeff Clark, held listening sessions with our Black team members. And to date, they have spoken to, I forget the exact number, I think it's around 800 Black team members across the US. And we've gotten some great feedback, and they're working on design thinking sessions to have ideas and actions that we can take to really make this a more inclusive environment.
You know, I would have to
ahead.
also say, Angeline, to kind of add to that, one of the things I'm most proud about is, you know, what our ERGs did. They came together in a time where people were really, really hurting, and employees and team members really were struggling with what they were seeing on TV, and, you know, having to have tough conversations within their families. You know, one of the things around Standing Strong, you know, I thought was really powerful was when our BNA community held like a moment of reflection. And when they first started and BNA is our Black Networking Alliance, ERG, when they first started the conversation, they were really trying to create a community for their ERG itself of, you know, maybe a couple hundred people coming together to be able to, you know, kind of commemorate the loss and be able to have a safe place to, you know, share their thoughts. What was incredibly powerful, I think, along with the ELT listening sessions, was also the fact that so much of our leadership stepped into that dialogue without prompting from anyone. And we had over 26,000 employees come together to be able to support the Black Networking Alliances across the world. It went across regions, it went across cultures, and I think that was a really powerful moment that really shows the culture of who we are as a company and how people come together during a really hard time to support each other. And I wanted to highlight that as part of some of the things you had mentioned.
I agree, Asha. I remember attending that moment of reflection, and it was so moving. I attended the US time zone one, and I also attended the evening one for APJ because it was just so amazing to see the number of people who came together.
We broke the Zoom, literally. 26,000, and we couldn't contain anymore. We made a world record.
That's right. You know, and I think what's significant, oh, go ahead, Lou.
No, I was going to say, for me, on a you know, even closer to home, for me was the work that the Pride ERG did in sponsoring a kind of an allyship with the Black Networking Alliance. There was a whole session just talking about the common bond between the organizations, and I think I may have got a little choked up during that one for sure. That was pretty special.
Yeah, the be an ally session, right? That was incredible.
Yeah, and it was, from a Pride perspective, you know, all this was happening during June, which traditionally is Pride Month, and the Pride group, we just decided, like, you know what, this is important. Pride is still going to be there. Let's support all our ERGs, specifically the Black Network Alliance, and we became their allies, which we're always, in the, you know, gay community, we're always looking for allies, but it was our turn to be their allies, and that was just wonderful how that came together.
Yeah, it was
Yeah,
powerful.
it really was, Gabe. And, you know, one thing that we're working on now, the Ally Task Force within Pride, we're working with other ERG leaders in North America to expand the Ally program to be more encompassing and inclusive of everyone, and not just how to be an ally to the LGBTQ community, but how to be an ally to every community, which is really powerful. So I look forward to that next year.
Yeah.
And what I think has been significant about Standing Strong Together, there is a list of initiatives that have been an output of that, some within HR, some within our social impact and giving teams in terms of how do we address racial inequity externally. And even though it's initially focused on our Black team members in the Black community, overall, it's really about driving inclusion, right? And so I think that's how it's really accelerated the whole D&I conversation in my mind at the company.
Yeah. You know, one of the things, Angelina, as you're talking about this, was really brought to mind is as we were going through that, you know, very emotional time, everyone was like, how do we talk about these, you know, racial injustice type of topics? And there was a slew of assets that were kind of floating around. And as a D&I organization, we were like, hey, let us help you find a way to be able to give access to, you know, a much larger, wider company-wide audience. So we built a learning pathway around, empowered by our Black Networking Alliance around those topics. But very quickly then we're pivoting to other ERGs. We have one with Pride going to be ready by the end of the year. We're working on the ones with women. So Standing Strong has become more than just about the Black community. It's really been about, really standing strong together. I think that has been wonderful to be a part of as a team member here at Dell.
Perfect. Thank you so much. So let's kind of switch over to talent acquisition. And, Luke, you share, some specific initiatives that we're working on, some of the things that our team has done towards these Moonshot goals, kind of out of the box thinking.
Yeah, and actually, it all starts with thinking more creatively, like I had mentioned previously, and listening. So early on, Gabe, we coming into this year, we wanted to make sure we were closely tied to the employee base and understanding what is it that they want as a partnership with talent acquisition. So we went on a tour, a listening tour, to listen intently to the ERGs that we've mentioned previously. So Women in Action, Black Networking Alliance, Latino Connection, True Ability that serves folks with individuals with disabilities, veterans and supporters. And I'm sure there's others that I may have missed in there. But the idea is just how do we come together as, this volunteer force within the company that is trying to move progress forward? How do we as talent acquisition start to understand where we can kind of come together and start to attract the talent that we're looking for the future? So that's where we started, and that's where the conversation starts, and then we start to move through. So through those kind of engagements, right, we were able to, one that came together was an employee resource group, employee referral program. So we know we have these 2030 goals. We know that hiring has slowed, but those goals aren't going to go away. So how do we get intentional about working with the Black Networking Alliance to build out an employee resource, a high-touch, white glove service to get referrals today for opportunities that would open up down the road? So we successfully launched that during February, Black History Month, in partnership with BNA. And it went so well, we decided then to move that out to other ERGs like Latino Connection, and then also Women in Action. So we kind of grew the program exponentially from that point. And then our leader, our executive leader, asked us to think about how can we expand that even then globally. What would that look like? So small idea from one ERG here in the US blossoming into something that could be a global impact was pretty powerful. And another one kind of tied to that came out of that experience was BNA was asking about, well, if we give you our candidates and our referrals, how do we involve ourselves in the process? And that also tied to an idea through our senior executive leader, where she was looking for big ideas across talent acquisition. If we've slowed in hiring and she's moved all of her recruiters globally to become diversity sourcers for roles that would occur in the future, what else could we be doing? So another idea that kind of came to the forefront was originally tagged reverse interview, but we've turned it into a career and culture discussion. So how do we let candidates or prospects decide how they would like to learn more about the culture of Dell Technologies and select someone outside of a traditional interview process where they could talk to someone in Women in Action or Pride or Latino Connection to say, what's the culture like inside of Dell without being judged based on their skills or competencies for the role that they might be interviewing down the future. And that's just been a fantastic opportunity to think differently about the engagement with candidates of the future and how they get to know us on a more personal level of the things that really matter with them outside of the day-to-day job responsibilities. So those have been two that popped to mind that are pretty creative and pretty innovative.
Right. I think what I remember or what stood out to me most on the ERG referral program was just that eagerness from the employee resource groups to say, yes, we want to participate. We want to do this. And we had every ERG knocking at our door. How do we participate? So it was like, hey, let's get the pilot program going, fix all the kinks, and then we'll definitely expand it out. But it was nice to see that reaction. Everybody had an appetite for it.
Yeah, it was a reciprocal opportunity for us to kind of build a collaborative, trusted environment, right? they could feel comfortable in handing over a valuable asset, their referral to us, and knowing that they know what that person, where they were in the process of being interviewed, how they were being handled. If they weren't a fit for an opportunity for us, they knew at least that their referral was getting some advice on their resume or some closeout of understanding of why they weren't a match for a particular role, but we'd obviously keep them in mind for future consideration. So it kind of leveled up the respect between talent acquisition and the employee resource group. I think it was really a good good way to start our relationship this past year.
Right.
Well, and I think one thing too, Lou, you know, as a lead within Pride, and Gabe, you'll know this very well because we've had this discussion, but, you know, we are often, well, we're measured. Our employee resource groups are measured on our initiatives and how we're doing. And we have plans that we set out at the beginning of the year, and then we measure ourselves for that return on investment. And I think that the ERG referral program is a great way to show that ROI. You've got advocates that are out there that are, you know, encouraging people to come to Dell, and we're passionate about Dell and we love the culture here. So we are your best evangelists, right? So rewarding us is great by the return on investment to really show, because that's something, again, that we can measure. If people are coming to us through a particular ERG, then that's a great way that the ERG is advocating and champion our culture and bringing people to Dell. So
yeah, I think you and Gabe came to me pre-COVID back in January, like, hey, we've got this conference in Boston for transgender. Can we have TA representation? I was like, yeah, why wouldn't we? Like, that just makes sense.
yeah.
Yeah, we have to reach out to communities that we haven't in the past. And that's, you know, part of the thinking out of the box.
Right, exactly. Why not? Like, let's not start with no, let's start with why not.
Yeah, for sure. Well, so you brought up COVID, and I know it's been mentioned a couple of times on the call today, but, you know, given the pandemic, Lou, how would you see that some of the initiatives that talent acquisition is doing, is it shifting any, given, you know, the current climate and everything with the pandemic? Are y'all doing anything differently with respect to hiring or?
Yeah, it's a complete game changer. I came into this year thinking one way in which we're going to make major changes. We were going to think about these national partnerships that we have with National Society of Black Engineers, Society of Women Engineers. We have SHIP upcoming, Society of Hispanic Professional Engineers. How do we, you know, move away from one time a year conferences and really build a better relationship for year to year, end to end of the year relationships, and really exploring different ways in which we engage within our communities? I was thinking our major locations throughout the US. Well, we had kind of even tossed that out the window come February, March, because one thing COVID has brought us is we've always been a strong work from home a company, but now that doesn't even matter. It doesn't matter where you're located. So we're uncoupling skill from location completely. So not only do I think about the communities in our backyard of our major populations, but talent exists everywhere in the US. And so how do we start to, in my mind, develop that heat map of where is that talent that we haven't been exploring because it hasn't been within a 50-mile radius search or something like that. So there's been a lot of work being done in exploring, like, where do alumni live that had gone to some of our core schools or some of the Better Together schools that we have identified. How do we start to look at professional associations and understand where their membership sits throughout the US? So like NSBE or SWE or those such. So creatively thinking about where that talent is, and then how do we go after it and attract it with different types of webinars or engagement series. So it's just a completely novel way of thinking about it this past year, which has been absolutely exciting because it moves from transactions to relationships. And I think that's where we want to be. We want to be in the relationship business of understanding where the talent's coming from and think collaboratively together around those talent pools.
It's funny, Lou, you made me think about, you know, the leaders, you know, when we think about, you know, COVID, you know, one of the biggest challenges when we walked into this year is we had these, you know, very hairy, stretched, you know, progress made real goals that were really going to be a lot of work to make it happen. And COVID hit, and then I think we were all like, okay, hey, what do we do now? Like, this is even more scary. And I thought what was really interesting was it was the first time probably The one good thing about COVID was everybody was not on a plane. I kind of crack out of it. Even I wasn't on a plane. I spent about 75–80% of my time on a plane, and all of a sudden we were all home, in front of our screens. And the one thing I think we did do a good job of during that time was really taking the time to educate our leaders on what our progress made real goals are, and what, Angeline was a big part of this, what it would take to be able, what's the infrastructure it's going to take to get them set up to be able to be set up for success. And so, lots of work around scorecards and accountability about what measures gets done. But the funniest part of the whole thing is, with COVID, as scary as it was, it really gave us an opportunity to kind of be able to spend time with our leaders more than probably we normally would have.
I think it also, I totally agree with you, Asha. I think it was a big realization for a lot of leaders. I mean, Lou, you had mentioned that we have a history of working remotely, and so we were used to that. But there were still a fair number of people and leaders who, yes, they do some work from home, but now it's like 100%. And they were pleasantly surprised at the productivity they could maintain. I've also heard the level of sort of customer intimacy that they were able to have just in interacting with folks. And then the other thing is, I do think it helps contribute to inclusion, right? Is no longer is it where you've got some people on the phone and some people in the room, or, all those different aspects. Is we're all in these 2-inch squares now and contributing somewhat equally to the conversation. And so I think that's been a really interesting shift, and that leaders have really taken to heart. And I think the other thing that would have been a challenge with COVID, but has really turned into an opportunity, is the talent pool piece that you mentioned, Lou. Is now there are whole geographies and areas that we can consider that previously may not have been as top of mind, right? And we're not as constrained by, can you relocate to a certain area or whatnot? And so I think it's great to be able to find talent where they are and where they want to be, and having the flexibility to really broaden the type of folks that we talk to.
Absolutely.
Definitely. I think we use this time to really take advantage of it and think differently, and many minds were changed. We've got different managers that were thinking we're never working from home, and now they totally embrace it and love it. It also created, I think, a very unique opportunity for employee resource groups where people wanted to connect, and the numbers just grew tremendously.
Oh my goodness. I could tell you stories, Gabe, when I think of it. So I lead the employee resource group.
Yes, definitely.
So I'll give you a little bit of data, because I'm a data girl, and this is kind of, the story that, I told my boss. So, when I first took this job 2 years ago, we looked at our employee resource groups, and we have 13 ERGs across 50,000 team members in about 60 countries around the world. And I would tell you, they are the best people in the company. I mean, literally, they come together with common interests, backgrounds, and they really work together to learn together, to develop new skills, and really focus on impacting the business, the customer, and the community. I mean, that's just who they are as just good people. And one of the things that it cracked me up, because it talks about wanting to connect, was when we first set this 50% employee resource group goal, we were at 31% at the beginning of this fiscal year. And I remember my boss said, hey, you got to go from 31 to 40%. I kind of laughed. I thought he was kidding, because year over year for the last 10 years, we only grew about 4,000 people in an ERG every single year. And this past month, I was looking at data. We're 6 months into COVID. We went from 31,000 people to 50,000 people. It's 5 times the rate in 6 months that we do in a year. And you think about where we are in a society where people are feeling very isolated, they feel very disconnected, and people are looking for people to connect to. And I think the most powerful thing was when COVID hit, our employee resource groups really went strong into our business and stepped up and really met people where they are. Connexa stepped in. They were our remote ERG. They came in and gave tips and tricks to people and says, hey, we know how to do this. Let me show you how to do this. And they gave tips and tricks to go in and do that. We had, Women in Action and Family Balance come in and say, hey, let's talk about parenting resources. I mean, we had ERG after ERG just kind of step into the narrative. And I think people that felt very disconnected all of a sudden said, I want to be connected, but I want to be connected to the good people. And I think we've really seen that in the last 6 months. And I'm hoping that trajectory will continue on because I still got to hit that number. But in all things, I think that, that really tells like a very beautiful story of who our ERGs are and the people that are part of it.
Definitely. And I think even just the type of programming that was brought from professional speakers to fun. In Pride itself, we've done 3 lip sync contests and
the parties, the Friday parties, the dance parties. I love them. I love them.
My favorite was when Michael showed up. Michael Dell showed up.
I think that's our all-time high.
That was great.
Another
For
thing
Asians in Action, I was going to put in a plug. We have Asians in Action. We had Asian Pacific American Heritage Month, and so we did virtual cooking demos.
That's right. I remember that.
Bloggers, and we had the highest attendance we've ever had. Loved it.
Yeah. Well, and we had Michael Dell reading stories to the children.
Yes.
I was laughing because I had my 12-year-old here, and all the other kids got to watch their parents got to watch their kids talking and listening to Michael Dell read a story. My 12-year-old was like, Mom, you can step outside the room. But how cool is that? He's like, me and Michael are having a conversation. I'm like, oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I think it was Take Your Kids to Work Day. And he said, well, since all the kids are at home,
right,
that he did that. I thought it was so creative.
So fun.
So cool.
But it also created a unique opportunity for many events for people to participate with their families, their kids. I mean, I brought my son to several, of the events, and he's like, "This is work." Yes, it's work.
Yeah. Well,
this is what I do all day.
The fun part of work.
I mean, I have to plug in our corporate social responsibility team. They created this campaign, this virtual campaign called All for Progress. And it was really kind of virtual volunteering activities because people want to help and they just don't know how. And they came in and created these virtual volunteer opportunities for people to plug in and help people, whether it was helping the education system or the local nursing home, or even this person, they're helping the person down the street buy groceries. And we, in the last 6 months, have 11,000 volunteer hours from our ERGs alone. I mean, that's incredible when you think about people wanting to help people in need. I think those are just, some common things our ERGs have been doing.
We are relationship people.
Yes, definitely.
So
So,
Asha,
go ahead, Nikki.
I'm sorry. I was going to say, so Asha, when you think about the Moonshot goals, what specifically can Pride or the LGBTQ community, how can we support D&I and the company reaching these goals?
One of the things I think that has always been a differentiator of Pride, and we talked about it in the Standing Strong Together kind of journey, was this culture of advocacy and allyship. And, I continue, in research and in internal data and even in programs we have existing in the company, we see that, that sponsorship, that advocacy, that allyship, that really is a differentiator in the diversity narrative. Because not only does it kind of support everyone in all communities, but it has compounding effects for those that are diverse. And we see that happen over and over again. And I think Pride has, done an incredible job of being able to kind of share best practices. And I think that those kind of practices, we need to figure out how to elevate it at the company level so that it's a set of tools that every leader has. And every individual receiving that sponsorship advocacy and having that dialogue so that we can equip for a culture of advocacy. And that's really kind of directly where I think is the big differentiator we can get from our Pride group today.
All right, sign us up.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I would echo that on a smaller scale. I remember Gabe doing a pronouns training for a large majority of the talent acquisition recruiters. And I'll never forget, a couple of weeks after that training, one of the recruiters approached me and said, "Oh, I get it, the he and she and the his and the her," because I was talking to someone and they referred to themselves as a different pronoun. But it clicked, and you could see that little one training actually impacted someone else's way of thinking moving forward. So it's those small little things that kind of fill the cup to make it a full cup and just makes you feel really good and proud.
Yeah, definitely. Good. So before we wrap up, I'll just give each of the speakers an opportunity just to kind of give a closing comment. I really appreciate that you have volunteered to be part of this panel. It's been a great conversation. So I'll start with Lou. So any final words?
Oh, I don't know. I mean, you know me, Gabe. When you first came onto the team, is what my question to you is: what else could we be doing inside this pillar? How can we be opportunistic? Keep me honest. Bring to me things that you think might be useful for the community. And I think that's the journey that we're on together still. Even this morning, I was asking you, like, what else could we be doing? So I think as long as we continue down that path of wondering what else we could possibly be doing, that's where I see the beauty in what's coming next for us working together here. So
Good. Thank you.
very helpful.
Angeline, any closing words?
You know, continuing the theme that Lou had about what we could be doing, I know that I'm also board member for the Agents in Action ERG, and I just kind of want to say thank you, because I think Pride's been such a great example of different types of content and programming that so many other ERGs can leverage, like the allyship initiatives, like the pronoun training. And I know that within Agents in Action, and also as someone in HR, it's like, wow, that's great. And the level of impact that those initiatives have had on the company has been really significant. So thank you.
All right, awesome.
Well, I lead the ERG, so I can't have any favorites, but I gotta always tell you, I love, as a Pride team, what you guys do. I love that you're always willing to I always tell people, some people go up to the line, some people walk on the line, and some people dance on the line. But every time you guys do it, you take us to an edge where we're like, okay, now, what do we do next? And you make us think about things. And Nikki and I and many of you guys have had these conversations. What do we do? How do we make ourselves better? And I think one of the most powerful things that I watch you guys do as a community, and watch the ERGs coming together, is collaborating across and teaching each other and learning from each other. There's so much power in that community when it comes together. And I would just say, hey, keep going and doing what you're doing, because it's working, and you should be incredibly proud of what you guys are bringing to the table.
All right. Nikki, wrap us up.
All right. Well, so I just want to thank all of our panelists today for your time. So Gabe, I just want to thank you for your partnership and your friendship, most of all. Last year when you and I were talking about what we were going to do this year at Summit and what we were going to submit for, we had all these great ideas, and you ran with this one. We have got a great story to tell at Dell with respect to our Moonshot goals and our culture. So thank you, as always, for your leadership and your friendship. It means more to me than you'll know. And Asha, I want to thank you for being such an awesome D&I support and ERG support leader for us. The work and the support that you all give us from a D&I standpoint is absolutely amazing. And we wouldn't be successful without your team. So thank you so much. And Angeline, likewise. So the Diversity Action Council, the work that you all are doing is incredible. And we love that we get to partner with you and on the initiatives that you all are working on. And we look forward to being able to continue to do that until we reach our goals. And then Lou, last but not least, you're amazing. I love getting to partner with you, and your support from a talent acquisition standpoint and just as a leader is incredible. You take us to new heights every time, and I appreciate everything that you do for us and our culture here. And then also, before we wrap, I want to thank Eric Day. He is our executive sponsor for Pride, and Eric is one of the founding folks who started Pride at Dell. And without Eric and his leadership and his support, we would not be the employee resource group that we are. We are a connector. We are business innovators. We champion team members, and we want them to have great experiences at Dell, and we advocate on behalf of our community. So without Eric's support and all of our board, we would not be where we are today. So I'm incredibly blessed. You all are awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, Nikki.
I'm leaving with a warm, fuzzy feeling.